Like one great West African sage said, the world is a very old place, but the future springs forth from the past. In other words, history, it's not just for the sake of knowing a bunch of stories. It's about understanding where you're at and where you're going. A failure to recognize and understand the African Muslim history in America specifically is, for all intents and purposes, to pull the rug of validity out from underneath one's own feet. So if you were to say Muslim to my father, someone born in the early 1940s, he would have usually thought about black Muslims, people that had a very ostensibly, very obvious identity by way of their dress, by way of their mannerism, and also because of their unique and frankly problematic socio-political stances. And I say problematic vis-a-vis the societal context that they were in, because they're talking about a very, very different narrative of African experience in America, and there's a very, very different conversation about what it means to be black, and because of that, what it means to be white. So it's a very problematic conversation in that social context, and very radical. To kind of put things in perspective, Malcolm is assassinated in 1965, Dr. King is assassinated in 1968, and then Elijah Muhammad passes in 1975. So by the 1960s, the Nation of Islam had gained this kind of recognition as, for all intents and purposes, in the mind of Americans in general, and particularly in the minds of black Americans, that would have represented Islam. Dr. Jackson's argument that before the influx of Muslims from historically Muslim countries and this great influx of immigrants, that the nemesis of American Islam was white supremacy, but that as the shift of authority takes place from the proto-Islamic and the Islamic movements amongst African Americans to an immigrant authority, that the nemesis really becomes the West, because those are people that are hailing from countries that were colonized by Western powers. So the political realities in that process influence the discourse, and now the nemesis of Islam, the nemesis of Muslims in that experience, becomes the West. Well, you've got a bit of a conundrum now, because now you're in the West. So what do you do with that? So if African Americans, Latino and white and other converts that are American as apple pie, adopt that type of thinking, it inevitably leads to some level of self-hate, right? Or just complete confusion. I had a lady ask me less than a week ago in front of a crowd of a bunch of people, can you please share with us, with the crowd, that it's okay for us to keep some of our American culture? And she said, at least some. And this is someone who converted to Islam decades ago as a white American convert. And I said, with all due respect, Auntie, I would say that it's okay for us to keep all of our American culture. The only things we do away with are things that are explicitly prohibited in the sacred law. It's okay to be American if I'm a Pakistani kid who lives in the suburbs. It's okay for me to be American if I'm a black American convert who lives in the inner city. It's okay for me to be American if I'm a multimillionaire Arab American business person, because American is a national identity. It's not a religious affiliation. So when people say to you, brother, where are you from? You say, I'm American. No, you're Muslim now. Well, you didn't ask me what religion I am. You asked me where I'm from, and that's where I'm from. And frankly, I think it's really important to say, we're not talking about immigrant convert, because a lot of times it is convert Muslims that perpetuate negative understandings of Islam from their own short-sightedness. And to think about the fact that Fard Muhammad, who influences Elijah Muhammad, was an immigrant himself. And so the whole Nation of Islam experience is set off by a person who immigrates from a Muslim background. That's like part of the narrative that people don't talk about. So the point is, the influence of these two communities on one another, it's not a new thing. And what is Islam in America gonna look like when the Somali woman marries the Latino convert, and then the white convert marries the Pakistani lady, and then their children marry one another, and then they marry an African American, and then they marry someone who's Arab? And now some people are going to listen to this and say, he didn't mention our country. That's the whole point. That you can't write this. You could not write this narrative. Only God could. And what I am very hopeful for is that there's going to come a time where a person embraces Islam in America, or a person is born as a Muslim in America and experiences that as a very normal, natural, fluid American experience, that there's not this constant tug of war. I look forward to a time when people can look back on some of the conversations we have and say, wow, I wonder why they were so confused. Like, what's the big deal? Like, I really hope that happens. And when that happens, that Islam hasn't been lost along.